I'm Andrew from the Andrew Thron Improvements YouTube channel, and over the past couple weeks, I've been working hard building this 700 square foot deck. And although it looks nice and inviting from the surface, it's actually a prison with no way down. Okay, so it's not that bad, but we still gotta build some stairs. But these are not just any stairs. I used a few secret building techniques that are gonna help this staircase last forever. This video is going to cover every aspect of the exterior stair building process, from cutting the stringers all the way to attaching the stringers to your concrete landing. And if you're thinking, I don't even have a concrete landing, neither did I. I'm going to show you how to do that too. And finally, I'm going to show you all the Power Pro products I use to get a super durable staircase that's going to last a long time. Here's what they look like finished. Now let's build them. To get the measurements for the stairs, we have to get the height from the top of the deck to the floor, but you don't want to measure right here because this dimension is a lot less than the dimension where the stairs are going to land. So instead of measuring here, we want to measure from the top to the bottom where our stairs are actually going to land. If you have a small staircase, you can just use the level trick and measure up to where the level is level to get your total rise, but I like to set my laser level even with the top of the deck and then just see where that line projects on my tape measure. In this case, we have a total rise of 67 1/8 inches. And now that I have my total rise, I'm going to head over to an online stair calculator and it's going to tell me everything I need to know. So our total rise is 67.125 inches, so I'll input that here. In my area, the maximum stair height is 7 3/4 inches, so I'm going to input 7 inches as my target height. The stair tread thickness is my Trex board, which is 1 inch. For the stair tread depth, I'm thinking somewhere between 10 and 11 inches. I'm going to start with 10 1/4. Now let's see what this thing spits out. So our typical stair height is going to be 6 11/16 inches, and our tread depth is 10 1/4. But you might notice that the calculator assumes that the deck is going to be our last step. Most stair stringers are cut this way. It's what we're doing on our deck, but some people do add an extra tread at the top, but that just creates a weird bump out, so we're not doing that. Because we're going to be using the deck as the final step and we stepped our stringer down, we're going to need a support here to hang our stringer on. And I'm not playing around when I attach this cleat. I'm using Power Pro structural lag screws because I want to make sure that this cleat is as secure as possible. I do not want this thing moving around. And these structural lags require no pre-drilling and they're pressure-treated lumber certified, which is exactly what I need. And I may have gone a bit overboard with the amount of screws I use, but this is where the screw is attached to the deck. I want this to be solid. Now that we have the vertical cleats installed, I gotta install a horizontal 2x8 to get it flush with the outermost joist on my deck. Again, I'm using Power Pro structural lags to attach this brace, and if any deck builders are watching the video, let me know how you attach the brace for mounting your stringers. I think this is a pretty solid option, but I'd be curious what you all are doing. And the last thing we have to do before we cut the stringers is build our concrete landing. The total run for the stair stringers is around 92 inches, so I'm gonna excavate a 30 inch by 60 inch by 9 inch deep rectangle around 92 inches from the edge of my deck. Next, you just want to compact the soil. I'm just using a hand tamp to do this. And I'm going to put down some landscape fabric just because I have it, but this definitely is not necessary. Next, I'm going to add around 4 inches of stone. Level out the stone with a shovel, compact, and then check that you're relatively level using a level. I'm creating a 2 foot by 4 foot rectangle for my concrete form using a 2x6 and Power Pro screws to secure the boards together. After placing the form on the stone, check that you're square by confirming that the diagonal measurements from the opposite set of corners is the same. Now, it's crazy to think how many micro skills and tools are needed just to build stairs. You know, we haven't even cut the stringers yet, but we're talking about concrete, we're using laser levels, you know, we're doing math on a stair calculator. There's a lot that goes into even simple projects like building stairs. So for all you DIYers watching, let me know what project you thought was going to be simple, but the second you got into it, you realized there was so much more involved than you originally bargained for. I think my biggest DIY wake-up call for something like this was my first bathroom remodel, where I had an unexpected rotted subfloor, a cast iron pipe that was rusted out that I had to replace with PVC, some electrical issues, and for anyone that's done DIY, you know that there are dozens of micro skills that go into each and every one of those projects, not to mention a bunch of tools. But anyways, I mixed my concrete using some bag concrete mix and the mud mixer, but you can obviously mix all your concrete with water and a wheelbarrow as well. And I I went with a trowel finish instead of a broom finish because no one's going to be walking on this slab, so I don't need traction, and I feel like the broom finish is just a magnet for dirt to collect. And after 24 hours, I removed the forms. And if you didn't have an existing concrete stair landing to start, the workflow would be to kind of approximate the total rise of where you think the bottom of your steps will be, then to use the stair calculator to get your total run, and then to build your concrete slab. Then you would go back and rerun the calculator after the slab's in place. Okay, it's finally time to actually cut the stair stringers.
So I have my pressure treated 2x12, which I'm gonna use for the stringers. But before we can cut it, we wanna establish the crown of the board. To check the crown, you're gonna sight down the longest edge of the board. The board is gonna have a tendency to either crown up and have a curve like this, or crown down and have a curve like this.
Check both sides of the board to determine which side is crown up and which side is crown down, and we want to cut all of our stringers with the crown up.
When it comes to marking the stringers, you're gonna use a framing angle. From the calculator, we know that our tread depth is gonna be 10¼ inches. So we're gonna position the framing angle right here so that 10¼ is in line with the edge. And then we know that the riser is gonna be 6 11/16. So I'm gonna position that so that we're right at 6 11/16. So at this point, we basically have our framing angle positioned where it needs to be to mark our stringers. What I like to do to hold this framing angle in place is I like to take a board on the back side, and then I'm gonna use a clamp to clamp it right here, and then another clamp on this side, and it's gonna hold it in place so that we never get off. So now we have one unit that we can slide down the entire stringer. So at this point, we can mark our first stringer.
This mark right here is the first stair tread, and this mark is the second riser. When it comes to cutting the first riser and the bottom of our stair stringer, there's a few things to keep in mind. Set your framing square so that one leg is parallel to your first tread line, and then mark the perpendicular line. And you might be thinking, we need to measure down 6 11/16 inches because that's our typical riser height, right? Well, no. We have to subtract the tread thickness, which is 1 inch from the bottom step, since there's not going to be a tread on the concrete slab. All the rest of the steps are going to have treads both on the bottom and the next step, but this one doesn't have one on the bottom, so we got to subtract 1 inch, making our measurement 5 11/16 instead of 6 11/16. Place one leg of the framing square parallel to that vertical, and then mark perpendicular, which is going to give us the bottom of the stair stringer.
And now we're just going to keep moving that jig down the entire length of the stringer.
And for those of you who are a bit more old school and you'd rather calculate your stringer dimensions by hand instead of using a calculator, I have a completely free ebook that goes into more detail on the stringer calculations if you're curious.
And this is going to be the last tread. So I'm just going to mark this side right here. And then instead of going up here, we're going to go this way.
And just like with the bottom of the stringer, we're going to take our framing square, position one leg so that it's parallel to the top tread, and then we're going to mark that perpendicular line.
Okay, so at this point we have our entire stair stringer marked.
And it's finally time to cut out the first stringer. I made the majority of my stringer cuts using a circular saw, but you might notice that when I cut the first riser and tread right here, that triangle at the top doesn't fall to the ground. Although a lot of contractors will overcut their stringer so that it's just a one-stop shop with a circular saw, this can weaken the stringer. So best practice is to leave your circular saw cuts a little bit short and go back with a handsaw or a jigsaw to make that final cut in the corner. Now in my case, there's plenty of meat and thickness at the back of the stringer where I probably could have overcut these no problem, but if you're using a 2x10 for your stringer, or if you have a deeper tread, it's just good practice not to take the shortcuts. And there's nothing like an old handsaw to keep you humble, and it's a good reminder of what our ancestors went through before we had all these fancy power tools like the mud mixer. I mean, they'd be rolling over in their graves. But I'm not gonna lie to you, the handsaw was more for theatrics. I went with the jigsaw for the majority of these cuts.
Okay, time for the moment of truth. It's always a little nerve-wracking because if you got it wrong, you basically wasted 30 bucks.
The initial stringer placement looked promising, but we need to mark where the stairs are actually gonna contact our deck to know for sure.
So the top of the stringer is gonna land right here, and we're gonna have to mark that by either going 7 11/16 inches down from the top of the decking, or we can go 6 11/16 inch down from the framing. It's gonna be easier to use the framing, so I'm gonna go 6 11/16 down and mark right here.
And we're gonna make that mark on both sides.
Then I'm just gonna take my level and mark that all the way across.
Now that we know exactly where our stair stringer needs to land, we can reposition the stringer and make sure that everything looks perfect. Overall, I think we did a pretty good job, and we can use this stringer as our template.
Now that we have our template stringer cut, we can place it on top of the next 2x12, and we can use it as a template to mark and cut the next one as opposed to starting from scratch. That's gonna save us a ton of time.
I recommend using clamps to hold the template in place on the new 2x12, and after crowning your 2x12 and having everything positioned where it needs to be, mark all of the cut lines by tracing along the template. And if for some reason your first stringer wasn't perfect, you wanna make any adjustments, double check your math, make sure that your framing square was positioned correctly, and recut another stringer if you have to, because you wanna make sure that your template is pretty much perfect. After tracing all the cut lines, remove the template board and make your cuts on the new stringer just like before. My deck stairs are going to be 48 inches wide, and I like to have 12-inch on center stringer spacing for stairs. So I'm going to have to repeat this process to cut 4 stringers. Make sure that you use the same template for all your cuts so you don't have compounding errors. And here is the final cut. Now, at the bare minimum, you want to treat all of your cut ends with some wood preservative, but I'm going to do something a little bit better than this in just a minute.
With the stringers cut, you do have the ability to hang each one of them individually using some kind of hanger strap hardware, but I like to do something a little bit different.
I like to turn all of my stair stringers into one complete solid unit, and to do that, I'm gonna attach a 2x4 at the bottom of the stair stringer where it contacts my deck. I'm gonna cut this notch using a 2x4 wafer as the template on all 4 of my stringers, and then when I attach the 2x4, it'll look like this. But the real magic and the reason these exterior stairs are gonna last forever is what happens at the bottom of the stair stringer where it contacts the concrete. For previous stair projects, I cut out a 2x6 notch at the bottom of the stair stringers that I could use as a cleat to attach to the concrete. But concrete holds water like a sponge, and that's gonna cause that cleat to rot out very quickly. So for these stairs, I'm gonna increase the depth of that notch by 1 inch, and that's gonna allow me to install a 1-inch PVC board underneath that cleat, and I'm also gonna cut off 1 inch at the back of the stringer so that I can install these mini pieces of PVC that are kind of like horseshoes. That way none of the wood is contacting the concrete. So I went and I marked the 1-inch notch at the back and then the 2.5-inch notch at the front and cut that out using a circular saw and a jigsaw, just like we did for the other parts of the stringer. Now in theory, if you knew you were going to do this, you could just mark this once for your initial template and then carry it over to all the rest of your stringers, but for illustration purposes, I did them all individually. As mentioned before, this staircase is going to be 4 feet wide, so I'm cutting my 2x6 cleat at 48 inches, my 2x4 cleat at the top at 48 inches, and then the PVC board, you guessed it, at 48 inches. To attach the 1-inch by 6-inch piece of PVC to the 2x6 cleat, I used some construction adhesive and a few exterior brad nails. And for those mini pieces of PVC at the back of the stringer, which I'm calling horseshoes, I used construction adhesive and again, a couple exterior brad nails to hold it in place. And this is mainly for installation. Once these are sandwiched against the concrete, they're not gonna move at all. We're gonna be placing the stringers 12-inch on center, so I'm marking that both on the bottom and the top cleat. Alright, let's put this whole thing together. I had to flip the stringers over so I could get access to the bottom of the stringers, and then I temporarily secured the cleat in place with some clamps. I used 2 3-inch exterior rated Power Pro screws per stringer connection, and I think this is going to be pretty solid. And I forgot to waterproof where the top cleat is going to contact the deck, so I went back and installed that now. Start at the bottom and work your way up just like shingles. And this is probably overkill, but I don't like the idea of 2 pieces of wood coming in contact. I feel like it rots out prematurely, so I think this will help the deck to last a little bit longer. And as I attached the top cleat to the top of the stairs, this thing kept on getting heavier and heavier, and it was at this point that I realized that last time I did this, I had a second set of hands helping me move this thing around. Trying to move this thing on my own was difficult. It was very heavy, it was pretty cumbersome, and it actually made me rethink my strategy for building stairs if I'm working by myself. Hindsight being 2020, I probably would have attached each stringer individually, but if I have a second set of hands, this is still my favorite method. After positioning the top of the stringers on my freshly marked line, I secured the 2x4 cleat to the deck using some more Power Pro structural screws. And I've also seen some people install the stringers with some angle brackets like this. If you're gonna do the cleat, you don't need both, but I wanted to show this for illustration purposes. And the final piece of the puzzle in making these steps last forever is the application of Power Pro joist tape to the tops of the stringers. As I showed earlier, applying a wood preservative is also acceptable, but a high quality joist tape like this one from Power Pro is gonna be 10 times better at repelling water and protecting the vulnerable cut ends of our stringers. Because I'm using composite tread boards, which can last up to 50 years, these stringers are going to be the weak point and are likely going to fail first. So by protecting them with this joist tape, I'm hoping that these stairs will last at least 50 years, but hopefully forever. The last thing we have to consider before installing our treads is if we're going to need blocking for our railing or for our tread boards. I'm not going to need any blocking for my tread boards, but I do need to install some pieces of blocking for the railing that we're going to install in next week's episode. I'm going to need some blocking at the bottom of the staircase and again at the midpoint, and I'm using 3-inch exterior rated Power Pro screws to hold the blocking in place. And don't forget to go back and apply Power Pro joist tape over any of the blocking. You don't want to create a weak point for moisture and rot.
Now to actually attach the stairs to the concrete, we're going to be using some Power Pro concrete anchors. I wish these were a little bit longer, maybe like 4 inches, but I think 3 3/4 is going to be just fine to go down through this and into the concrete. But first, we got to pre-drill using a rotary hammer.
And the Power Pro screws come with a 1/4-inch bit, but I have a 1/4-inch SDS bit for this hammer drill, which is going to go a little bit faster than a standard drill to actually drill down into the concrete. And make sure that you turn off any hammer function when actually screwing the screw into the concrete. I'm going to be installing 4 anchors, 1 anchor between each set of stringers. And it really would have been smart to install the anchors between these 2 stringers before I put in the blocking, but you know, you live and learn.
All right, had to switch over to the smaller drill.
And I feel like I have a mistake or an oversight like this on every single project, so maybe let me know down in the comments if it's not just me. Or maybe it is, who knows?
1, 2, 3, 4. I don't think this is going anywhere.
When it comes to the stair risers and the trim out, I like to use PVC, and I prefer to buy these 4x8 PVC sheets because it's a little bit cheaper, but it is a bit more flimsy than the individual boards. I ripped this PVC down to our typical riser height, which is 6 11/16 inches, but you could use a circular saw just the same. Then I cut it to 48 inches, which is the width of my staircase. And I designed my stairs to be 4 feet wide because I can get 2 4-foot pieces per every standard 8-foot board or trim piece. I like to install a board stop on one side of the staircase, and that's going to make sure that my risers and my treads are perfectly flush with the opposite end that I'm working on. To secure the risers to the stringers, I used a bunch of 2-inch exterior rated brad nails, and do your best to try to make sure that the top of the risers is flush with your stringers. To install the treads, I cut my Trex boards to 4 feet, and I'm using square edge here because the edge is going to be visible as you come up the stairs. I'm using that sign there as a 1/4-inch spacer, both at the back of each step and between each of the tread boards. And I'm using color match screws to attach the boards to the stringers. If you want more information on installing composite decking, I have a detailed video showing exactly how I install composite decking on this entire deck, and I'll link it down below. One thing to note is that we have around a 1-inch nosing, which is exactly what we wanted, and that was by design. My desire for that 1-inch nosing was the reason that I selected 10 1/4 inches for the tread depth on the stair calculator. After installing the treads, I installed the stair railing, but that's going to be next week's video. But for now, we're going to trim out the sides of the deck stairs. I confirmed my stair angle and then transposed that over onto a new piece of PVC trim. In our case, the stair angle was right around 33 degrees, so I scribed that line and cut it out using a circular saw. With that angle cut out, you should have a piece of trim board that sits flush on the concrete stair landing at a similar angle to your stairs. I clamped that trim board at the top so that the bottom of the trim board was even with the bottom of the stair stringer. Next, I marked the inside of the trim board so that it would extend past that nosing on the first stair. Then I removed that PVC trim board, scribed that line a little bit further, and then cut it off using a circular saw before repositioning it in place to check fit. And after reclamping the bottom of the trim so it's even with the bottom of the stringers, I took a pencil and I marked the top of the nosing on each stair. This mark is going to indicate where I need to cut my trim board so that it covers up the side of all the nosings. Using a level, I connected the tops of all of the nosing marks, and then I cut that piece of trim to the final width using a track saw. Now for my last staircase, I went absolutely crazy with a bunch of miters on some Trex boards to kind of make this really intricate trim on the side of the stairs, so I wanted to do something a little bit simpler on this staircase. But for any deck builders that are watching, what do you do to trim out your stairs? Do you use this method or do you do something a little bit different? And unfortunately, this staircase was just long enough where I needed 2 pieces of trim, so I clamped the second piece in place right there, and then I used another board to scribe that angle at the top. This should be the exact same angle at the bottom, but it's easier just to scribe it. And after cutting that angle at the top, I went back and ripped it down to the same width as the first board. And I like to paint all of my trim before I install it, and then I'll go back and do a little bit of touch up later on. With the trim painted, it's time to permanently attach it to the stairs. Position it in place at the bottom, clamp it at the top, and then again, we're using exterior rated brad nails to secure everything. For this last piece, I clamped it in place and then I marked exactly where those 2 pieces were going to come together. But instead of cutting it flat for an ugly butt joint, I mitered both sides so that I had a 45-degree miter wider where they come together. This is going to help to disguise that joint a little bit better. After getting it where it needed to be, I secured it with a few more brad nails. And don't worry, I'm going to power wash all that dust off later. Now let's take a quick reminder look at where this project started, and here is a look at the final result. Overall, I'm pretty happy with how these stairs turned out, and be sure to subscribe to the Power Pro channel and also the Andrew Thron Improvements YouTube channel if you want to see the rest of this deck build. I'm very confident these stairs are going to last a long time thanks to Power Pro, and thank you all for watching.